Good afternoon. So Saginaw Bay once had thousands of acres of rock reef. Those reefs built one of the most productive freshwater fisheries of the Great Lakes, and but we buried them. A century of logging, farming, intensive draining, ditching, agriculture smothered them in sediment until the reef spawning fish had almost nowhere left to spawn. So therefore, last fall, we dropped 2 million pounds of Michigan thumb limestone into Saginaw Bay, and now we're watching to see what comes back. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Jolly. I'm the Southern Lake Huron Unit Supervisor for DNR Fisheries in Michigan. And today I want to do a quick overview about the importance of fish habitat and in particular, a reef restoration project. So habitat restoration in Saginaw Bay, it's never been a solo act. The organizations you see here represent broad community of partners who've shown up for this work over the years, across projects, across funding cycles. Not every one of these folks contributed directly to the Channel Island project, but all of them have been part of moving the needle on the fish habitat in the bay. So that's the point. Work like this requires everybody being involved in it. So we've lost a lot of habitat in Saginaw Bay. Like I said, the timber harvest, intensive ditching, agriculture drainage, accelerated erosion across the watershed. Sediments washed into the bay, smothered the rocky habitats and the reef spawning fish that depend on them. Coastal wetlands, river estuaries, lake backwaters have been disconnected or filled in through development, industrial activity. You know, fish need all of these habitats at different points in their lives. So you lose any piece, you start to compromise the whole life history. The good news is we're trying to do something about it. And what do we do about it? And the answer is everything in as many forms as we can. You know, the rock reefs for spawning fish, coastal wetlands, these dampen wave energy, they reduce sediment resuspension, they create incredibly complex habitats for plants, invertebrates, birds, and fish. Shoreline stabilization to stop the problem areas, to stop the bleeding, you know, reducing the ongoing erosion that keeps adding to the problem. And the through line across all of these is diversity. The more habitat types means the more prey types, more predators means a more resilient system. A system that can absorb the next disturbance, whether that's an invasive species, a bad year of ice, shifting climate. And so this project had 4 goals going in, you know, to increase the diversity of the spawning and nursery habitat, support a more resilient fishery, complement some of the existing reef work across the Great Lakes by adding both nearshore and offshore data points, and leverage the multiple funding streams to get more done than any one agency could do alone. So it's about building a coalition that can sustain this work over time. So here is what we've lost. These are sort of some of the documented historical reefs of Inner Saginaw Bay. Thousands of acres of rocky structure once gave walleye, lake whitefish, dedicated to spawn. Some other fish may also spawn on those. You know, for a long time during the recovery period of walleye, the contemporary recovery period of walleye in Saginaw Bay, we thought most walleye had shifted almost entirely to river spawning. You're going to hear a lot more about this tomorrow morning from Dr. Fielder, but we're starting to get some information that at least a third of the fish are spawning in rivers, but a significant amount of the walleye are still spawning in the bay. And that's actually encouraging because it means the reef spawning behavior hasn't been lost. And it means we have fish depending on bay habitat that's degraded and limited. So the argument of the portfolio effect holds, maybe even more urgently than before. So a population split between river and bay spawning is more resilient than one concentrated in either alone, but only if both habitats are functional. So, and that, you know, that conversation was largely centered on walleye. So before there was Channel Island Reef, there was the Coreyon Reef. That was completed in 2019. It was offshore spawning reef, still in sort of what we call Inner Saginaw Bay, but offshore. It was about 2 acres of limestone and glacial cobble placed on an existing historical reef complex. It was the first project of its kind in the bay, and it worked. Walleye and lake whitefish adopted the reef for spawning almost immediately. We don't have extensive data. There's still monitoring happening, but we did document that. And the success did a couple things. It validated the approach. It raised the next question. We had proven offshore reef could function, but what about a nearshore reef, which sort of was our intention all along, to have sort of two paired reefs to compare to. And so Corian gave us the confidence and the credibility to go back to the funders, ask for a feasibility study, and find out. So Channel Island was the answer to that question. But before we could build anything, we needed to figure out where and what. So through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, they funded a feasibility study that examined 3 candidate sites, and each had a slightly different goal, but all were contributing to fish habitat in the bay. So there was one project at the Kaukaulin River mouth that was a reef that was designed to intercept longshore sediment transport. So essentially it's a structure that was trying to reduce sedimentation at the mouth of the Kaukaulin River. It needs to be dredged all the time for boats to get in and out. Also, a secondary function is to provide a spawning area, fish habitat. So 2 problems solved with one project. Another site that we looked at was called Winona Beach. This was more of a coastal wetland restoration aimed at addressing a real flooding problem as a low-lying area. During high water years, this community would flood. Secondary benefits of a project like that, you're creating fish habitat. Again, two purposes, one project. And then the third idea was the Channel Island reef, the most traditional of the 3, dedicated nearshore spawning reef for fish. Hoping to benefit walleye and lake whitefish. So all 3 sites went through the same rigorous data collection, bathymetric survey, sediment hardness, sediment sampling, all the wind wave modeling, the sediment transport, the resuspension. And the goal is to find where the restored habitat would actually function and where the community would support it. Now, the second part, it was really important. Quickly, I'll just orient you on the map here. So the green dot sort of way out there, that's Corian Reef. The blue dot is the Channel Island location. Sometimes it's called, on the map, it's called Shelter Island. It's also called Spoils Island because that island is the spoil disposal facility for the dredging that happens in Saginaw Bay. And these 2 red dots that are kind of close together, that's Kaukaulin and the Winona Beach area. So then you see the river coming in, which is Saginaw River. This is the Bay City area. Now, we didn't just parachute in here and start dropping rocks. The engagement started early, one-on-one conversations. We had an in-person workshop in May 2023. We have a project website, presence at the State of the Bay Conference, a lot of virtual meetings, and we actually listened. The Kaukaulin project area generated real concerns about recreational boating hazards in a very heavily used area of Saginaw Bay. The Winona Beach area, a lot of the residents push back on potential impacts to shoreline aesthetics. And those are legitimate concerns of the community. And we withdrew both of those projects. In my opinion, community buy-in isn't a nice to have, it's a must have. A restored reef or a restored habitat project that the community resents is not really a success. So Channel Island rose to the top because the science was strong and the community could get behind this one. So then we started zeroing in on kind of our area of interest. So that's sort of what this red zone is. We needed to get precise in this area. We did the deep dive on the site characteristics to determine exactly where on this sort of it's this northeast shoreline that kept kind of showing up as kind of the better area. The kind of behind the island there, a lot of mucky, soft sediments, really not great for building a reef. And so, we did all the wave energy modeling, the sediment sampling, the contaminant testing, all of it, focused on finding the right specific footprint for this area. And so, I want to spend a second here on the site selection criteria. I know there's many in the audience here that wants to know about these things. The wave energy was good. In general, you want a good reef is one that is not going to sediment over, that's got the right wave amount, that's kind of going to do some of the cleaning, keep it aerated. When there's larvae and eggs down there, you want good oxygen, that sort of stuff. So you're trying to check all those boxes. The sediment quality was coarse sand, low silt, pretty clean profile, pretty firm bottom there. The contamination, we tested for all the things, you know, the metals, the dioxins, the furans. Given the history of this watershed, that's not optional. There's certainly, you know, toxicity problems out there. Everything came back really well below the thresholds that we were concerned about. And then the navigation safety, that was designed in from the start. We wanted to make sure we could design this in a way that wasn't going to be a hazard. And then, you know, we did the pre-biological surveys and confirmed walleye and whitefish were already generally using the area. So we weren't guessing about the fish. We're trying to build this thing in a place that we think the fish want to be. So here's what we designed. About 2 acres, about 600 by 140 feet wide. It rises about 4 feet off the lake bottom, sits at least 5.5 feet below the surface at low water levels. So that keeps it below the draft of the recreational boats. The side slopes run at about 35 degrees, you know, steep enough to hold together, create the good interstitial structure. Not, you know, one thing I learned, this isn't just a pile of rocks, this is an engineered structure. And some of us wrote some notes to encourage the fish to choose our location, so we'll see if it works. So we got it done last fall. Construction was between September and October. The limestone was quarried right in the thumb area, loaded onto barges, moved out to the site, placed by a crane. Claw picking up that cobble and dropping it precisely into position. So 2 million pounds of Michigan stone placed in about 5 weeks. And I think the timing matters too. We tried to get this fall construction window to avoid spring walleye spawning, but also get it done and get out of there before that late November time when the whitefish and that sort of come in. So total project investment about $2.74 million. Came from 4 major streams. National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the National Coastal Resilience Fund, that supported the feasibility and design. The Tittabawassee River Nerdist Settlement contributed $1 million. So that's restoration funds derived from Dow Chemicals agreement for contamination in the watershed. So that's being reinvested right back into ecosystem recovery. And then the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, NOAA, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funded both additional feasibility work and construction. So no state tax dollars, no license fees. This is entirely built on grants and settlement funds. You know, and it protects a walleye fishery valued at over $33 million a year and a commercial whitefish fishery that's, you know, in the millions of dollars as well. So starting this spring, we're starting a 2-year monitoring period. Are the fish using the reef? Are the walleye and whitefish spawning there? How does it compare to the Coreyon offshore reef? Is it accumulating sediment? Are the descended mussels colonizing it? We don't have any of those answers. It's pretty exciting. We get to now monitor that and see what happens. You know, and if both of Coreyon and Channel Island are considered successes, I think this builds the case for building more reef restoration. I think each time we do these things, the folks that do it get better at it. We learn something, and with that, that's all I have. So hopefully get us back on time and take any questions.